So spend the money to find the answer out today, spend the money to kill the idea, or spend the money to validate the idea, and then you'll get more money to back it up. So take risks sooner rather than later.
Hello and welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to Pillars of Wealth Creation. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. With me today, I got Colton Pace. Colton, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, appreciate you joining us. Colton is the CEO and co-founder of Ownwell, proprietary software that automatically identifies property owners who are overpaying on real estate expenses. So, man, like everybody, right? Helps them reduce their costs of owning real estate. And Colton has managed billions of dollars across several asset classes, such as real estate and venture capital. With that said, man, give us a bit about your background, a little bit more, and then we'll dive into Ownwell and what you guys are doing today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Todd. Yeah, my background's mostly in asset management. Started my career really helping people manage their wealth. I worked for a billionaire. I worked for a couple of different venture funds that worked for very wealthy individuals. And really that's where, my career in asset management has led me to founding and creating Ownwell. At Ownwell, we want everyone to manage their real estate like a sophisticated investor. So I took the tools, tips, resources, and access that I saw helping manage assets for a billionaire and said, like, which of these can we use for everyday property owners, small and medium business owners, and commercial real estate owners? So bringing those tools, tips, and resources. And that's how today at Ownwell, we are helping people reduce their property taxes, their insurance bills, their utility bills, and their loan costs wherever we can, using the same tools, tips, and resources and education that I learned working for some of the most wealthy families in the country. And and kind of leaning into the bio you read, Todd, today we can analyze property taxes are public record. Mortgages are pretty much public record. We can analyze the costs associated with most people's real estate, and we actually market directly to customers that we think we can save money for. So that's where, we use our algorithms to see if you're overpaying on your property tax bills, see if there's anything you should change about your assets, and we market directly to you. Of course, we take customers who want to save money anytime, but the great thing about Ownwell is we operate on a contingency fee. So if we don't save anything, we're not going to charge you anything. If we do, we take 25 to 35% of the expense that we've reduced. So really no downside. If you're not looking at your expenses, looking for savings, then let us take a crack at it. And if we save you some money, we all win.
Yeah, I love that model. So, I mean, it's a model that really you're saying, hey, we're pretty confident we got something there. And it's a kind of a no lose because most people aren't looking that carefully at expenses. And quite frankly, even if you are, and you go with your software and you don't find anything, you're not paying. So even if you are looking at your expenses, it's kind of a no lose, right? It doesn't make any sense. So I love that. And I love that you took, so this is why people are successful and why what you did makes a ton of sense. Like you worked for a billionaire, you worked with wealthy people, and you took the tools and the tips, the resources, you said, okay, this is what's needed. This is what I see successful people doing. And I'm going to implement this into a software then that can help everybody. And that right there is how you create something, right? You're taking what's already out there and successful for people, and you're packaging it together and giving it to the masses. So kudos to you. That's really awesome. Does it work well with, I'm just trying to think, okay, so we track our expenses. Most people track their expenses is probably Excel. That's like the most common, right? But we're tracking our expenses using property management software. So, you got Appfolio, you've got Buildium, you've got you name it, right? There's a ton of property management softwares out there that a lot of people use, or you got QuickBooks too. So Excel, QuickBooks, all those. Does it flow with those if I'm tracking my expenses, and how does it actually track what's going on?
Yeah, great question. And we work with customers of all types. So an individual that owns one home to we have customers on the platform that own thousands of properties across commercial real estate and homes and mobile homes, et cetera, right? So expenses across these different types of real estate are wildly different. And yes, we work day in and day out with customers on Yardi and Buildium and Appfolio, and we have ways to connect external IDs. So it's very easy for customers. So if you have more than 10, 20 properties and it gets really complex and you're off Excel, right? You can give us a dump of basically your export, and our account executives and our team can onboard all that for you. The real place where like our bread and butter and where we started was property taxes. The majority of property owners in the country, 95% of property owners in the country just pay their property tax bill, no questions
Well,
asked.
yeah, because it is what it is, right? Most people think you got a property tax bill, you just gotta pay it. So what are you doing differently that helps you save money on property taxes?
Exactly. Yes, most people treat it like a bill. They're like, this
Yeah.
is the bill. But as you think about, it's similar to income taxes in that, like, if the government just gave us the W-2 bill and we never took any deductions, then we just pay the number they hit. But every single year we go through a process of tallying up these deductions, et cetera. So what you were mentioning earlier, Todd, like all the expenses that you have, deferred maintenance, anything like you've spent on your property from an improvement standpoint, those can be deducted off of your property tax assessment. So each year the government comes and depends by state and by geography. It's always different because it's run at the state and county level. But every single year or on some sort of cycle, your property is assessed and they throw a number that's supposed to be fair market value, not throw a number, but calculate a number using mass appraisal technology. They don't know that your whole HVAC system went down in this property. They don't know that your roof got messed up, tons of hail damage, and you had to replace it. Those types of expenses are how we actually go in and have a really compelling case to reduce your property tax bill. So like V1 of onboarding into Ownwell is answering an annual property survey. So if it's a couple properties, you flow through this survey because not everybody's keeping an Excel spreadsheet. If you have an Excel spreadsheet, even better, upload it for our tax consultants. They'll dig through all this information, find what's useful. We've performed over 240,000 property tax appeals at this point, right? Like this is what we're best at. We dig through the data for you to make sure in your geography we're taking advantage of all exemptions. They're called exemptions, but essentially similar as deductions for those properties, making sure that we're appealing on time if we should, or if there's nothing to save you, we'll come back and say like, hey, your tax bill's fair this year, go ahead and pay it. So worst case scenario, again, it's kind of a no lose scenario. We'll do all the work, make sure that you're not overpaying on your property tax bill. And if you are, we'll take action on your behalf.
So just so listeners understand, like there can be massive savings in property tax bills. We hired a consultant, and sounds like we should have probably just used your software system. But we hired a consultant this year, and we've done this we do this really every year. They look at the property taxes, and every couple of years we are reducing our property taxes pretty massively. And this year on one property in particular, we reduced our property tax burden by about 23%, which is huge considering the tax bill that property had. So we saved, multiple five figures on our property taxes because of that. So that can be really, really huge. Probably the easiest thing you could do. You mentioned utility bills. You mentioned like there's a lot of different savings. What else is the software really good at kind of helping?
Yeah. So that first product that we started with was property tax because it was so underpenetrated. You're in a minority, Todd, in that you're already doing this, but most people don't even think about it.
I don't do this for all of my properties, by the way. This is just for some of our bigger properties that it makes a big difference for.
Exactly. And that's where, we knew we had to build a software solution because you're like on the back end, we have tax consultants. We have tax consultants, boots on the ground in every geography, going in with and talking to the assessors. But for us to help people with a $200,000 home, you've got to automate some of that, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why you go to a lawyer, they're not going to talk to you about a $200,000 property tax or $200,000 home's property tax bill.
And if they do, they're going to take all the profit that you,
Exactly.
they're going to charge
Right,
you the
right.
entire bill.
Exactly. The hourly fee is going to be more than the bill.
Yeah.
So we started there, but then because we built the software and we'd identified all these expenses, we're like, okay, when you save someone $1,000 and we know other tools, tips, and resources used by the most successful to reduce these other bills, like let's keep going. So that's why, it's called Ownwell. It's owning your home well or owning your property well. With insurance and utilities, insurance is in a unique place right now that like some markets are really hard to even get insurance and everything's up and to the right, it seems. So it's becoming more and more painful. And whether it's landlord insurance or just your primary resident insurance, we've kind of, as consumers, have been trained to reshop for car insurance. It's not very common for people to reshop for home insurance, but we're seeing increases of 30% year over year on insurance premiums.
Yeah.
And so we've identified 40 different carriers that we use across the country, and we shop across those 40 different carriers. That's and really basically bring you back a quote if you should change, and if you shouldn't, then again, we say like, we just shopped across 40 different carriers for you, and you still have the best premium or best coverage, depending on what you want to optimize for. And that you can really kick that off just by telling us your premium and your deductible and all the information associated with your insurance, and our software will go and automatically check. One of the pains we really solve here is you don't have to enter your email and get blasted over the next several months by all these insurance companies. You try and go get quotes anywhere and you're going to get endless emails. So like we try and strip all that out and make it just, if there's something, I like to think of it as an insurance concierge. Like we go and find anything that's relevant for you and we bring it back to you. And then on utilities, depending on where you are, whether it's Spectrum or Comcast, or we're talking about electricity bills, in few places you can actually change. And we will basically take your electricity bill, your internet bill, your phone bill, your security bill. And those are the 4 bills that we're really good at reducing. And because we have, over 300,000 properties on the platform, we know what the best price you can get is. So we can go to Spectrum or Comcast or, depending on the provider, or Verizon, and argue on your behalf and say like, look, I know people in this area are paying $49.99 a month, not $69.99 a month. So we have a team that actually calls and has direct lines into many of these providers, basically making sure you have the best deal possible. And again, that's $20 a month that adds up over, and it's something we do year after year as well on your behalf.
Yeah, love that. If you're not constantly looking at your expenses, you're getting farther and farther behind. Expenses are something that most of us just deal with, right? We don't look at how much we're spending on, because I feel like most people just think the bill's the bill and I got to pay it and it's not worth the hassle to change it. And that's where companies get you, right? They just keep on slowly raising your prices, potentially even reducing your service, and you just keep on paying it. And you keep on going and going and going. And all of a sudden, 5, 6, 10 years later, you're paying way too much for way too little, yet you don't realize it. And that's what can erode so much profit in properties. And we're looking at, and one of the reasons I'm excited to talk to you is because I wanted to find out more about your company, because I know that we have a lot of expense creep that happens in our properties. And we've got a lot of properties that I look at and I'm like, man, there's too many expenses that we need to start to look at to cut. We're looking at a property payroll service right now that we're just paying probably way too much. But we've been paying that for the last 3 years, because it takes time to look at. But if you already have something in place that's looking at it all the time, it just takes that burden off of your shoulders, I think. So that It's really cool what you've got going here.
Thanks.
I want to go ahead.
No, no.
Okay. I want to talk about the difficulties of founding a startup or just some of the things that, you know, you went through, challenges, maybe a fun story about founding a startup. You're seemingly working with some very successful people, and you kind of did you pull the plug right away on that? Did you say I'm going to do this, or was this a side hustle for a while?
Yeah. Side hustle for a while.
Yeah.
So this has been technically, started the company 4 years ago, but this has been in the making for kind of like 7 years. While I was in my day job, basically kicking around this idea, figuring out whether I could make this into a business that sustained myself. And then I found a technical co-founder who helps us basically build all the software. I'm the business finance guy.
I was going to ask you, are you the tech guy or the
I'm the
creative?
finance guy.
Yeah.
So like at the very beginning, it was me, right? Like I was operations, I was finance, I was business, I was going to a property tax appeal hearings. I was talking to like providers on the phone to try and reduce bills until
As you
we could
should
build
be.
it, right? Like I
Yeah.
feel the customer pain, and we build the software together. We don't
Yeah.
we don't build the software before we know it's going to work. So doing everything manually. But it was a side hustle. And there was a moment in time 4 years ago where it's basically, okay, do I quit my job and figure out some way to like pay myself and my co-founder, and we both have, aspects of our lives we need to pay for as adults and caring for other people as well. And we ended up raising venture capital just to basically pay
Okay.
ourselves a $50,000 a year salary. It's like, okay, I can pay my rent, and then we can give this thing a real shot.
Yeah.
And they just kind of snowballed from there. There's endless stories I could tell you of the challenges of founding a company, but all worth it in the end, I think.
What's one of those stories, or maybe like one of the bigger mistakes that you guys made, and how did you learn from it too?
Yeah. I mean, so many
Well,
mistakes.
any mistake. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the
Yeah.
biggest, right? There's so many probably to choose from.
Yeah. I think like one of the bigger mistakes that actually hurt us from a financial perspective is like we didn't believe in ourselves.
Hmm.
We'd always like second guess what we were working on and be like, oh, we need more of a cushion. So from starting a company in the venture capital world, you got a seed stage, Series A, et cetera. We've raised 3 rounds of financing now, and candidly, like we didn't take the bank account as low as we should have
Hmm.
before. Like we didn't invest in marketing when we should have, when we knew that the ROI was there, and we were a little bit scared like to put
Yeah.
the pedal to the metal. And because of that, like it's taken longer. We have raised more money, meaning like we own less of the company because we've taken more dilution from a fundraising standpoint. And so one of the bigger mistakes as a founder was really like, being scared, candidly.
I how do you avoid that now moving forward? I mean, you've learned a lot and you've grown in confidence because you're seeing it working, but how do you remove that fear barrier or work past it?
Yeah. This is where like I think my time as an investor gets beat into me. It's like rules-based investing.
Yeah.
And you go back to like, okay, here is how I operate. Don't let emotions get in the way. Yes, you need some safety net, some cushion. And for us as founders now, we're basically saying like, all right, here's the level of risk that we're willing to tolerate. But besides that, let's crank it. And I guess like double clicking on what actually happens there is like surrounding ourselves with people who have been there before that we can talk to, and that kind of keep us level headed, right? There'll be days that I come in, it's like I'm losing it, I'm stressed out of my mind. But then you call someone who's like not in the day in and day out, and they're like, hey, you're in a rosy situation. This isn't that bad. And like think about these things. So I think it's and that's the board, right? Like we have a startup board that we have consistent conversations with big text threads with. It's surrounding yourself with people smarter than yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what we rely on now.
Yeah. So powerful, right? Just having the right mentors around that have been there that can say, hey, look, this is just part of the business. Like you're
Mhm.
fine. Keep going. Have you ever read the book Shoe Dog by Phil Knight?
I started it, and I'm ashamed to admit that I didn't finish it.
You gotta read the whole thing because it just when you were talking there just reminded me of that book, and he's always pushing his company to the brink of bankruptcy, like constantly pushing it until the edge, and they don't know how they're going to make it the very next day or even that day. They're like hiding things from people. um they got investors coming in, and they're making sure that the investor doesn't meet the banker, and it's just hilarious, the stories, but it's so fitting to anybody who's been a business owner, quite frankly. Like you
Yeah,
just are, there's days where you feel like this is it, like everything could collapse today. And they're always pushing to the brink. And then, of course, we all know the success story of Nike. Anybody who's alive gets it. Like they did it okay in the end. But yeah, if you're willing to take that risk, not that it's going to work out every single time, but that's how you create greatness, is pushing it to the limits sometimes, and not being so fear based, which is easier said than done.
totally. Yeah, I kind of wish sometimes I could take my mind and like put it back to where we were 3 years ago. The sense of urgency, like the fighting for survival mode. I almost
Mm.
wish I could conjure that up more often.
Yeah,
It's like, no, I can't go home. I
yeah.
I have to like crank this out today because we're in trouble if I don't get this done this week.
It's funny you say that. I feel that sometimes too. I'm like, man, that sense of urgency that I had when I was 32 years old, like it was totally different than it is right now, 10 years later. It's just there's a different sense of urgency. And now, not that I'm sitting here today like lazy and complacent, but there's just a difference when you're scrapping at the very start.
yeah, yeah.
So talking about the struggle, what about some keys that you think have have been to your success? Maybe two or three big things that have really helped you get to the place you're at today.
Yeah. Two or three key things. I think the first one, and maybe it's repeating a smaller portion of that last bit we spoke about, is don't do it alone. Um, whether it's finding amazing co-founders, which I did, or finding amazing investors and really like mentors, and people to surround yourself with, whether it's advisors, people who believe in you, people who push you. Don't do it alone. Like I'll never start a company by myself.
Yeah.
Not only for like the loneliness aspect, but like it's just better outcome. So that's one. Um, and then I guess on this same thread, and I've said this before, um, is basically like take more risk than you're associated than you think you should at the beginning. Time is the hardest resource to get most of. So spend the money to find the answer out today. Spend the money to kill the idea, or spend the money to um, validate the idea, and then you'll get more money to back it up. So take risks sooner rather than later. If you can accelerate the time, time is money, but if you have the money, use it to accelerate time for a business or even a real estate deal, or et cetera. And then the third thing, kind of differently related, but as the business has grown, you don't really think about, and I went to business school at UCLA. There's all these classes around, organizational behavior and people management. And you don't really think, like as a finance guy, I'm like, okay, I got to take those classes.
Yeah.
But when you get in the thick of it, and today, our team is over 70 people. Um, there's an idiom that one of our investors says, it's like eventually all problems become people problems. So
Mm.
like, don't look past the people who you're doing it with, who you're hiring. hiring is one of the most important and highest leverage aspects of running the business today. Focusing on the people, the culture you develop, the sense of urgency that you maintain, right? All those aspects and of like the early days that have created what Ownwell is today, and whether it's a 3-person business or the way you operate is contagious. So really being intentional about the values, the mission, and what you're building is one of those pillars that I would rest like the creation of this business and what it's become on.
I never understood culture and what it can do, both good and bad, until I acquired some companies. And once I purchased a few companies and saw the negative culture inside of them and realized that then and I at first it was like, man, just things aren't working. I don't know what's going on. We got to get more profit in the door or more income in the door. Just man, it's just this is tough, right? And what we actually um fired 2 people that were kind of key people. I'm super nervous about doing that. And
Mhm.
when we fired those 2 people and hired the right fits, things turned. And that's when I realized that this is such a culture thing. Our culture shifted, the attitude shifted, the profits started to come in quickly. And then we fired a few more people and a few more people and made some really good hires. And it was amazing how the profit went, well, how it went from a negative, a loss, to a
Mhm.
profit very quickly. Um, exactly what you said. Just don't look past the people. People create your company. And
Yep.
I mean, you create your company, right? But that the people are ultimately the ones that are doing the day-to-day tasks. And if you don't create a good culture and have a good synergy within your company, it's just going to be a struggle.
Yep. Totally agree. Yeah. People are most valuable asset.
Yeah. Um, what's a lesson that you learned? And maybe you've already said it, but what's a lesson that you've learned from working for a billionaire and working for very wealthy people doing financial and asset management?
Yeah, I could go on a whole rant around financial education, but I think that the main lessons like educate yourself. Don't stop reading. There's so many, whether it's tax code. I mean, I'm a nerd. I'm in the tax code for lots of different reasons, but also just to learn. Right, like these, the most wealthy individuals in the world have dozens of people, whether it's tax consultants, attorneys, accountants, right? They're optimizing every aspect of their life because it's worth it, right? It's
Mm,
so large that it pays for itself.
yep.
And that's all those individuals are educated on those specific things. Like, no, we can't go out and become the master and genius of all different aspects of financial planning, financial wealth, and like again, surround yourself with great people, but never stop learning. Whether it's and things are constantly changing, right? The legislation's changing, ways to do taxes are changing, your income streams are changing. Staying educated is not only were the billionaires that I've worked with doing that, right? They read an incredible amount. So they were doing it themselves in addition to surrounding themselves with experts. So stay educated. And I think, part of Ownwell's mission is to solve some of the financial education issue that I think this country has.
You think of billionaires as having it all figured out, yet they're like reading more than most, right? They're always constantly learning. And so they don't have that mindset of we got to figure it out. But anybody looking at a billionaire is like, well, they got it all figured out. Like obviously, like right, they're billionaires for a reason. But
Yep.
I love that the optimize of all aspects, which is exactly what you guys are trying to do, is optimizing the expense um, portion. And it's so easy to, again, it's so easy to forget about and not even think about. But it's a quick way to turn uh, a big profit if you can control your expenses. So just just doing that, and I've it's a for me it's a fear a lot of times of, well, I don't want to hire somebody to do something when I can just do it myself.
Yep.
And then you don't do it yourself or you're not very good at it, right? And you should have hired somebody, or you should have bought that software, or you should because that would have truly made a big difference, but you just push it off. Like, oh,
Yep.
I can't spend the money on it right now. Can't do this, whatever. And you just continue to push it off. I do that all the time. I don't know about you, but
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, there's even simple examples of I'm renovating the triplex right now. It's like, man, I should have paid someone to do the floors. Should not have done that.
yeah, it's the classic. When I'm working on my own house and I decide I'm going to do some plumbing work myself, and I'm run to the hardware store 17 times. By the
Exactly.
time, and finally got that plumbing project done a day and a half later after 17 trips to the hardware store and had to remove things 6 times. It's like, what was I,
Exactly.
what am I doing? So, well, cool, Colton. So I got 2 last questions. One is, what's a favorite book you can recommend to our listeners?
Yeah. Right now, book that I'm probably using the most is a book called Crucial Conversations. Kind of goes
Love that book.
in line with, how important people are, both personal and professionally. And it's, I think it's written by many people, but really helps you, guides you in conversations, hard conversations, whether it be with a spouse or a person you're terminating, or a performance conversation, or even like a negotiation.
Yep. Love it. Last question. What are your 3 pillars of wealth creation?
Yeah. I'm probably gonna, do some repeats here because I think, we touched on a couple different things, but first one, uh, surround yourself with people smarter than yourself. That's an easy one, or at least try and learn from people smarter than yourself. 2, when you're in a position to take risk, take the risk. I'm not saying like sell the farm, but when you've done your homework and you're in a position to make a big bet that you're confident in, do it and don't hesitate and bet on yourself. And then the third one would be to always keep learning, whether it's trying to learn to do something new yourself or learning from others. One of our values as a company is accelerate innovation. And I think that goes hand in hand with continuous learning. It's like always try and do things better, even if you're always try to continue to optimize.
Love it. Love it. Colton, really appreciate it. Like I said, I love what you're doing. I wish the company well. Hope to see it continue to grow and continue to help people optimize their expenses. And maybe it's, I'm sure it'll grow and evolve and continue to hopefully help in more and more ways. How can our listeners get in touch with you, learn more about your company, and learn more about what you got going on?
Yeah. Thanks, Todd. The easiest way to get involved with Ownwell, for myself, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me a message. Ownwell, go to the website, ownwell.com, OWNWELL.com. You can enter your address and we can scan for property taxes and typical expenses in your area very quickly and give you a savings estimate associated on your property tax bill, because that's all public. And then through our onboarding process, it takes 3 to 5 minutes, depending how much information you want to give us and what you want us to look at. We can look at all your expenses pretty quickly. So if you just have a couple properties, you can go through the flow yourself. If you have multiple, our phone number's on there, support line, sales line is on there. But again, visiting the website, ownwell.com, is the best way to help reduce some of your expenses.
Awesome. Awesome. Colton, again, really appreciate it. Lots of value you've added today, and you have a fantastic rest of the day.
Cool. Thanks, Todd.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe, give us a thumbs up, go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. Your rating and review just helps us push this out to more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So the other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to venturedproperties.com, venturedproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out. And we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day. I'll catch you on the next episode.